Well, welcome everybody to the Aquarian series here at ULT San Diego. This afternoon, we are doing the 7 dimensions of Uranus, given to us by both Kurt Gradine and Jonathan Colbert. What? To Varuna, the chief of the gods of the natural and moral order. To make this Varuna come forth, sing thou a song unto the band of Maruts, wiser than thyself. This Varuna who guardeth well the thoughts of men like herds of kine. Let all the others die away. The night he hath encompassed and established the morns with magic art. Visible over all is he. His dear ones, following his law, have prospered the 3 dawns for him. He, visible over all the church, established the quarters of the sky. He measured out the eastern place, that is the fold of Varuna, like a strong herdsman is the god. He who supports the worlds of life, he who well knows the hidden names mysterious in the morning beams. He cherishes much wisdom, sage as heaven brings forth each varied form, in whom all wisdom centers, as the nave is set within the wheel. Haste ye to honor Trita, as kine has to gather in the fold, even as they muster steeds to yoke. He wraps these regions as a robe. He contemplates the tribes of gods and all the works of mortal man. Before the home of Varuna, all the gods follow his decree. He is an ocean far removed, yet through the heavens to him ascends the worship which these realms possess. With his bright foot, he overthrew their magic and went up to heaven.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Jonathan Colbert, and Kurt Gradine and I are going to give a presentation today on Uranus. You may wonder why we're doing 2 planets in a row in the Aquarian Almanac. Not totally sure, but I would say that the discovery of Uranus is in the Almanac, and I believe it's on the 13th. So today's the 7th, so that in a few days from now. So that's probably why they have this right now. Also, it's in preparation for what? The 84-year return of Uranus. It's coming up, I believe, in April.
Wow.
So that would probably explain a lot of the timing. And it says in the Almanac that Uranus signifies the ideal purity of the unmanifest. Very mysterious statement. And my colleague will help us kind of walk us through what that means. So I'll just share a couple things in the beginning about a theosophical approach to even thinking about the cosmos and the universe and all that. And theosophy, I'm going to kind of invoke 3 images: the asphodel tree, the music of the spheres from Pythagoras, and Jacob's ladder. And in reference, and interestingly, to me at least, they coincide with the first fundamental proposition of the secret doctrine, and the second and the third. And the inverted asphodel tree, what that's saying is that everything comes from the unmanifest. And there's something that the unmanifest even comes from, which is like the absolute Parabrahm. So all that is manifest and unmanifest, everything comes from Parabrahm. And it's unspeakable. It's ultimately transcendent. And everything that we see, that's an expression of the unmanifest. And everything is a living logoic expression of universal intelligence. So everything starts with consciousness and unfolds from there. Universal intelligence, you can call it Mahat, as the ancients in India did. So now we want to evoke the image of the music of the spheres. And this year, our whole Aquarian Almanac is based on the theme of the flute of Krishna. That has to do with sound. And really, as Ken Campbell's pointed out one time, when you're talking about sound, that's a way of talking about vibration, really. And so that's a whole vibration orientation. And so it's really sound, vibration, and energy. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing that resonates throughout the universe. And is what brings everything from the unmanifest into manifestation is sound. And we live in a universe then of intelligent law. You hear that in theosophical circles a lot. Well, it's intelligent law. That's a whole mystery that people are talking about and trying to get to the bottom of. And also the second proposition that we're really talking about is really talking about the ubiquity of cycles, large and small. And so obviously, you know, our topic today ties in with that. So then this Jacob's ladder idea, which I'm equating to the third proposition, really is just saying that the purpose of life is to learn, to progress, to climb a ladder, you could say. And all of life is really engaged on a great universal pilgrimage. And humanity and the gods and nature and the elementals and everything is all in this great pilgrimage. And that the universe itself exists for the sake of the soul's experience. What a dramatic statement. That comes from Patanjali in his yoga aphorisms. So that was approach to the cosmos. Now let's talk about a theosophical approach to the planets. So with reference to our topic today, what we're going to be talking about is archetypes, symbols and archetypes. And there are so many different kinds of archetypes. Somebody brought that question up in a meeting recently. Well, what's an archetype? That's a really good question. But it's anything that you could say that it's a symbol that belongs to the collective human psyche and that merges the unconscious with the conscious mind and helps us enter the world of abstract thought. So that's just something to think about. And in this context, with reference to the sun and the solar system, that it's really part, theosophically, we're talking about a family of planets, and that they're all brothers and sisters to each other, really. And that the sun is the great magnetic center, but it's a family of 7 sacred planets. And technically, usually when we think about the 7 sacred planets, what are they going to be? They're going to be sun, the moon, and then what? Mercury, Venus, not the Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. That makes 7. So what are we doing talking about Uranus? Well, it's not a sacred planet, but wait a minute, it might be. And more on that later. Hopefully I didn't spoil too much for you, Kurt. Okay, so, and then there's the idea of the planetary chains. And I threw the word vertical in there because it's talking about coadunition, which is really, if a human being has 7 principles, so do planets. So that's something to take into account. Okay, now there's something remarkable that the whole solar system exemplifies, and it's something that takes place within what is called the Guru Parampara chain, because the whole universe is really teachers and students, really. And the magnetic sun is like a great guru, and it attracts different chelas. It doesn't want chelas or not want chelas, but it just attracts them. It's just a big magnet. But the thing is that the centrifugal luminosity of this great being forces these different chelas to find their own different respective orbits. How close do I want to be to the sun, right? Okay. So, and that's, and we'll see that, you know, Uranus is the 7th. So we'll learn about that. So, but ultimately the objective of this orbit thing with these different disciples going around the sun is that they too may one day become in themselves a source of light, just like the sun. So I wanted to just mention a few things about this kind of introducing the shallow end of the pool of the archetype of Uranus. And I've got some notes written down in my cell phone here. Let's see if I can find it. So he's the one that discovered Uranus in 1781. And a lot of these ideas about William Herschel, actually, I got from Helen Valborg's Theosophical Astrology on her article on Uranus. But she was very fascinated, you can tell, by the fact that William Herschel exemplifies in his character many of the Uranian attributes. So she just, you can just tell she's just quite delighted with that. The idea that the guy that would invent, or not invent, but discover, would be so Uranian, so to speak. So the Uranian archetype is the breaker of bonds with a focus on the future and humanity as a whole. And such revolutionaries are no respecters of persons. That's a quote in the Bible from Acts, no respecters. God is no respecter of persons. I think of what that's doing is saying that God is not partisan. No portion of humanity is really better than anything else. So it's really a statement of universal brotherhood in a way. It almost sounds negative, no respecter of persons. Oh no. But in a way, it's not partisan, singling out any group, you could say. So the Uranians, their breadth and depth of wisdom and love is so universal that it cannot be contained in limited interests and relationships. So Uranians with this characteristic, they're kind of onto humanity. They're not really contained in particular relationships. All of humanity is kind of their gig. And their energy and their love and their wisdom spills forth in a disinterested stream of revolutionary insights and nonpartisan goodwill. So it's difficult to find a better example of these Uranian qualities than in the discoverer of Uranus, William Herschel. And he exemplified the match that occurs between human consciousness and that which it perceives. Nature reveals her mysteries to those whose faculties are already in tune with them. Valborg uses the term in coadunition with them. In Germany, William Herschel and his sister Caroline, so we're going to bring her into this because she was a great astronomer in her own right, and she's famous as such. She discovered a lot of things. But the two of them had received a great music education in Germany, but they moved to Great Britain in the late 1700s. And they established for themselves a very successful music conservatory. So they were musicians who taught other musicians. And they had a perfect thing set up. But this is just like what a Uranian will do. They'll set up everything just perfect, and then it'll just blow up the whole thing because they're on to the future. Okay. So, so the curious and penetrating nature of William's mind led him to a fascination with the stars. So, okay, music is great, but now we're talking about the stars. Okay, so the key words related to Uranus are change, disruption, revolution, and the urge toward freedom. This is very interesting. Why? Because of this Uranian return that's going to come back around in April. We know that's what's going on. Also, the Uranus is the disruptor of bonds, the breaker of bonds. So we'll see what's up with all that. So he converted what was an orderly home and a music school into a telescope factory. So now, look, imagine this room, all of a sudden, now we're making telescopes, you know. Everybody find a place to sit,
Yeah.
you know, don't mind that big thing. Nothing to see here. It could happen. Okay. So when music lessons had been completed for the day, the music room was converted into a workplace where telescope tubes were made and a huge optical lathe was set up for making lenses. With this new equipment, they began the first survey of all the stars visible in the heavens. Nobody had done that before. So these two set out to survey all the stars, pretty much what NASA is doing right now. But they were kind of ahead of the game. And so per our Aquarian Almanac, on March 13th, 1781, they discovered Uranus. First, they thought it was a star, but then they realized a few days later, wait a minute, it's moved. And they thought it was a lot of different things, but eventually they figured, wait a minute, this is another planet. This is huge. So let me just mention, so this picture here, that's what their telescope apparently looked like. They built this huge thing in the backyard somehow, or someplace adjacent to the home. They had a factory inside the home, apparently. And they set up this huge scaffold, this big tube. And maybe scientists can explain all that, but pretty bold thing to do, say the least.
I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if the little one was made first as maybe a model or something.
Yeah, I think they did. I think that's the whole thing, that they set up a smaller one and then they eventually made it bigger and bigger and bigger. So now just a few little fun facts about Uranus here before we turn this over to Kurt. Okay, fun facts about Uranus. Seventh planet from the sun. More on that later. From Kurt Verdeen. It rolls around on its side. I think I got a better picture for that. See, most planets, you have kind of a 23, 25 degree, 27 degree kind of tilt. This guy's got like almost a 97 or 98 degree tilt. More on that later. Kirk will tell us all about that. Takes 84 years for Uranus to orbit the sun. It has a temperature of minus 224 degrees Celsius. It's the coldest temperature on any planet in the solar system because it doesn't exude very much heat. Other planets do. The diameter here, I'm going to go to a different one. This shot and this shot, I think, are real shots, actual shots of the Uranus when our equipment flew past there like 42 years ago, something like that, which is half of 84. So that's a whole thing. More on that later. Okay, so this is probably a simulated picture, and I don't think a whole lot of people have actually been on one of the moons of Uranus. And so this is probably this is CGI, as they call it. 4.5 times as wide in diameter as our Earth. Give you some idea. So that's why I kind of like this computer picture, because if you're thinking of like an Ursula Le Guin novel or something like that, and you've got something where you're on a moon, but you're right close to this planet. The planet is huge. There's 29 moons, by the way.
29 what?
Yeah, you got to have 29 moons.
Moons.
Let's see here. Let's see here. Well, there might be more than 20. That's how many they found so far. Yeah. It's kind of a work in progress. This whole thing about, and it's 14.5 times the mass of our Earth. The gravity is about 90% of what we'd experience on Earth. So it'd be a little easier to walk around, I suppose, if you could find a place to walk, because they don't even know what the planet is actually made out of. It could be mostly water or some kind of ice, or it could be mostly rock. And now they're figuring out that both Uranus and its neighbor Neptune are not necessarily ice giants. They could be actually rock giants. So I think it's that kind of a thing where the more you know, the more you realize, wait a minute, I don't think I really know that much. But I think that Uranus is going to be a big priority with NASA in the next few years. They really want to go there and, well, not go there with people, but send equipment up there and try and figure it out. It does have storms, just as Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune do, but they're less dramatic. So it's kind of relatively calm, except for when it's not, but it's basically calm. And it does have a ring system, as you can see, just like Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune, except for Uranus's ring system is pretty thin, relatively.
Greetings, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking the San Diego ULT for hosting this presentation at such an auspicious time. And I'm calling it auspicious because world history is in the throes of the epoch-shifting volatile energies of Uranus at the current moment. We just recently underwent an opposition to Mars in the last 2 weeks. And because next month, Uranus transits from Taurus into Gemini, a position it will occupy for 7 years. And why this is so significant should become clear as we proceed. We drew from 3 primary sources for this talk. The first was the article on Uranus by Helen Valborg, which we would highly recommend to anyone interested in theosophical astrology. We also drew heavily from The Secret Doctrine, of course, as Helen does in many of her articles, and from the Gupta Vidya, the 3 volumes by Sri Raghavan Iyer. Before entering onto a discussion of the mythological and astrological teachings related to Uranus, I'd like to step back for a moment and ask a more general but fundamental question, namely, what is a planet? The stunning advances of planetary and interstellar science and physics, especially due to the brilliant technological advances of the Aquarian Age, have repeatedly burst the terrestrial boundaries of our otherwise earthbound collective imagination. It was on March 10th, 1977, the birthday of Raghavan Iyer, in fact, that telescopes first captured the rings of Uranus. Now, today, thanks to the Hubble and James Webb, we know it has at least 13 rings and 29 moons. While photos such as this one of Uranus by JWST with infrared filters is one of the most beautiful we know of, it still does not help us penetrate into hidden realities. Only the spiritual sciences of Theosophia, even in the few fragments we have been given, provide us with a spiritual bird's eye view, the metaphysical soul of astronomy and physics. And if we consult the Secret Doctrine, the teachings of adepts and seers who have penetrated all the veils of nature, the answer we get to the question, what is a planet, is simply extraordinary. Even at a beginning level, we are encouraged to gratefully begin considering and meditating upon the few guiding principles which were once given only via the mystery schools of antiquity. According to the SD, every galaxy, sun or star, solar system, planet, or globe is a sevenfold wheel, a mandala or chakra that mirrors the whole. The term wheel is used 12 times in the mystic language of the first 7 stanzas of Cosmogenesis. We see it first used in stanza 1, shloka 5, where the term is given as the symbolical expression for an entire Mahakalpa, that is, the evolutionary cycle of an entire Manvantara. We learn, however, that it also applies to any microcosmic cycle or system of evolution within that great wheel. And while every such wheel is a unique manifestation in an infinite series, we're told, and each time at a higher level, still all follow the same abstract formula, an eternal and archetypal pattern or divine law of unfoldment governed by the mystic seven. In addition, the planets and stars, which are visible to us, are only the most material, temporary, and illusory aspects of each sevenfold system. If we could see with the vision of great sages, we would know that every planet is in fact a singular monadic stream of consciousness moving through 7 stages of evolution. Furthermore, every element, being, or force on every planet or sun is either moving towards the human condition, is currently in the human phase of the cycle, or has passed through it to higher conditions of consciousness and activity. Even more remarkable is that this metaphysical knowledge gained through the paramita path can be symbolized geometrically and is given by H.P. Blavatsky in the page 200 diagram seen here. In part, what she is illustrating, of course, is the similarity of the trans-Himalayan system on the left with the Kabbalistic system on the right. But if we simplify the diagram for the sake of clarity, we can reproduce it in this way, while also taking note of a few preliminary explanations given in her commentary. To say that a planet is sevenfold is also to say that it is tenfold. As tenfold, the lower 7 are also referred to as rupa, the objective or formal planes of evolution. The 3 higher planes are entirely formless, divine, and spiritual. They remain constant, we're told, and unchanging throughout the entire period of a planet's manifestation, and emerge with the logoic heart of all such systems throughout the entire cosmos. And this tenfoldness is not unique to the trans-Himalayan and Kabbalistic system, but is also found in the Pythagorean decad, in Mazdian, Buddhist, and other cosmogonies. Number 2, each planet or wheel is an emanation or ray of the unitary and omniscient universal mind, manifesting through the omnipresent energy of divine sacrificial compassion, and is always inseparably bound or nested within a larger system. Number 3, each planet is a karmic reincarnation of an infinite series or lineage of former living planets, linked by an immortal thread soul, the Shista, or self-existent Manu, which retains the memory of all the wisdom gained. At each new dawn, the triune Logos holds in potentia everything that will eventually unfold through the 7 dhyanis of that system. Each planetary Logos, or Manu, initiates, emanates, differentiates, and incarnates into the planetary system that it guides. That Logos reappears in embodied consciousness as beings we would call Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Nirmanakayas, and avatars. Number 4, the 7 globes of every planetary chain correspond to the 7 principles of human nature and to the 7 dhyanis. Each of the dhyanis are the root base of vast hierarchies of beings, differentiating into 7 levels of consciousness, the 7 times 7 elements, and the 7 kingdoms. Each of the 7 also corresponds or represents specific evolutionary stages in which particular potentialities that are latent in matter and consciousness are developed and mastered. Each of them is also a kind of note in the flute of Krishna, vibratory levels of sound, color, or number, which can be described in terms of consciousness, substance, or energy, spirit, matter, or fohat. Number 5, a planetary round is a cycle of evolution in which the monadic stream passes through each of the 7 globes, each globe being constituted of 7 root races. There is a descending process of involution and an ascending process of evolution. Involution takes place in rounds 1 through 4, where the most advanced monads destined to enter the human kingdom traverse and assimilate the nature of the newly formed wheel. This passage through the lower kingdoms, pre-mineral, mineral, plant, and animal, is also distinguished by consciousness progressively consolidating from homogeneity into heterogeneity, from ethereal and spiritual states into material forms. And HPB likens this process to one in which steam condenses into water and water into ice. And this culminates in the 4th round, seen there at the bottom of the diagram, where manas, the capacity for self-conscious thought, choice, and individual responsibility, is awakened. Via this sacrificial awakening, the upward arc of evolutionary progress becomes possible through self-devised efforts in the cycle of reincarnation. And during rounds 4 through 7, the humanity on every planet tends towards reassuming, we're told, its primeval form, that of a Dion-Chohonic host, a self-conscious, godlike hierarchy capable of self-consciously and harmonically assisting in the further growth of wider spheres of being and higher levels of evolutionary unfoldment. In short, in approaching the study of any planet, we need to deeply engage the metaphysical imagination. What is seen with the physical eye is minute in relation to the unseen. What is unmanifest to the most sophisticated sensing instruments and mathematics of modern science contains veil upon veil. And when we attempt to describe the influences of a planet, for example, in astrological terms, we need to be cognizant of these many hidden dimensions. This is also central to the meaning of Uranus, etymologically derived from the root var, meaning to veil. While cyclic laws, such as those just briefly outlined, apply to all planets, that does not mean we would be able to see or to sense the living beings evolving on a given planet, even those in our solar system. So we need to be very wary of drawing conclusions based on the limitations of the senses and of those of modern science. In fact, HPB gives us this very challenging statement in Volume 1. The spectroscope only shows the probable similarity on external evidence of terrestrial and sidereal substance. It is unable to go any farther. Physically and chemically, matter differs on every planet, and thus atoms enter into new forms of existence undreamt of and incognizable to physical science. And even that matter, during rapid passage through our atmosphere, and here she's talking about a comet, for example, even through that rapid passage undergoes a certain change in its nature. Thus, not alone the elements of our planets, but even those of all its sisters in the solar system differ as widely from each other in their combinations as from the cosmic elements beyond our solar limits. At the same time, the teachings of theosophical astrology invite us to begin opening our awareness to a radical interdependence, codependent arising and co-adinition. We are constantly and intimately affected by and affecting other globes, those of our chain and of all other chains, all other wheels. Quantum physics has confirmed what occult science teaches, that even the observation of subatomic features instantaneously affects all entangled particles. Apparent distance in physical time or space is no barrier. From Francis Thompson, thou canst not stir a flower without troubling a star. The beings inhabiting planes of substance and consciousness on other planets may seem to differ enormously from our own, but still intermingle and blend with every point of space, no part of which, we're told, is empty. The Dhyanis, planetary spirits, and living kingdoms and races of every planet in our solar system move and live and have their being in every human being on planet Earth, as we are in them. Andy, in regard to our and other planetary solar systems, the secret doctrine adds many additional details. For example, while most planets rotate in the same direction, that is prograde as our sun, two in our solar system do not. And this is verified by modern science. Venus has an axial rotation that is retrograde, and Uranus is both sideways and retrograde. The secret doctrine teaches that this indicates that the planets did not all evolve from a single swirling protoplanetary disk or massive solar nebula, as first put forth by Kant and then later by Laplace, and now accepted by mainstream science. Rather, all the worlds, stars, planets, etc., as soon as a nucleus of primordial substance in the Laya, undifferentiated state, is informed by the freed principles of a just deceased sidereal body, become first comets, and then suns to cool down to inhabitable worlds. So she's giving us a very broad summary of a whole vast process whereby planets, after completing their sevenfold journey, go into a Laya state, or what's called a pralaya, that is a period of rest and non-manifestation, and then enter into a new cycle. And that's where she's saying here that emerging from the Laya, the undifferentiated state, they become comets and then suns to cool down to inhabitable worlds. Does that mean that every planet in our solar system was at one time a comet, careening through interstellar space to be finally magnetically drawn into the rotational pattern of our system? Are we willing to allow that many such stages could have occurred in which the fiery mist of cosmic nebulae existed, she says, in a cold, non-luminous, and invisible condition? The SD affirms such and adds that the sun of our system is not the mother of the planets, but rather their brother. And while modern astrology includes the sun as one of the 7 sacred planets, she says this was not true of the ancients. The secret doctrine teaches that the sun is a central star and not a planet. Yet the ancients knew of and worshipped 7 great gods, excluding the sun and earth. Which was that mystery god they set apart? Of course not Uranus. Couldn't be Uranus, discovered only by Herschel in 1781. But could it not be known by another name? And then she quotes the learned French Freemason, Jean-Pierre Ragon. Occult sciences, having discovered through astronomical calculations that the number of the planets must be 7, The ancients were led to introduce the sun into the scale of the celestial harmonies and make him occupy the vacant place. Thus, every time they perceived an influence that pertained to none of the 6 planets known, they attributed it to the sun. The error only seems important, but was not so in practical results. If the ancient astrologers replaced Uranus by the sun, and which cannot be turned aside from its true functions. And then HPV cryptically adds that the nomenclature of the days of the week is thus faulty. Sunday ought to be Uranus Day. Mythological dimensions of Uranus. Theosophia teaches that mythology was humanity's most ancient science. And in this densely packed paragraph from the 2nd volume of The Secret Doctrine, HPB demonstrates how the trans-Himalayan spiritual science is reflected in ancient Hindu, Greek, and Chinese mythologies. This is from volume 2, 776. The first astronomical teacher of men was Uranus, because he is one of the 7 Dian Shohans of that 2nd period or race. Thus also in the 2nd Manvantara, among the 7 sons of the Manu, the presiding gods or rishis of that race, we find Yotis, the teacher of astronomy, Yotisha, one of the names of Brahma. And thus also the Chinese revere Tin, or the sky, Uranus, and name him as their first teacher of astronomy. Uranus gave birth to the Titans of the 3rd race. She's going on to the Greek, back to the Greek myths. And it is they who, personified by Saturn Kronos, mutilated him. For as it is the Titans who fell into generation when, quote, creation by will was superseded by physical procreation, unquote, they needed Uranus no more. So we will attempt to unpack parts of what HPV is summarizing here. To begin with, Hesiod's chronology of the gods, Uranus and Gaia, emerge from chaos, the abstract space or parabrahm of Hindu philosophy. Other ancient sources give differing, though similar, genealogies. According to Orphic myths, for example, Uranus, along with Gaia, were the offspring of Nyx, that is, the night, and Phanes. Phanes was an androgynous primeval deity, symbolized by the cosmic egg entwined with the serpent. Taken by itself, the word Ouranos describes the vault or firmament of heaven, which the ancient Greeks believed to be continually revolving and carrying around the stars, which were fixed in it. Though abstract and seeming remote, this was the main attribute of Uranus, who was at one time their primary theogonic deity, though never worshipped and infrequently spoken of, except as a primordial ancestor of Kronos and Zeus. As mentioned, one of the etymologies of Uranus is found in the Sanskrit root var, V-A-R, which means to veil or to cover. And this points to the kinship that exists between Uranus and the Rig Vedic god Varuna, which HPB brings out, and to the metaphysical basis of the oceanic waters of space, as suggested in the myths of both traditions. At the most sublime level, we can link it to the veiling function, duration, and abstract motion of Mula Prakriti. And in quoting Subbarao's lectures on the Bhagavad Gita in her discussion of the unmanifested, undifferentiated, and eternal nature of primordial substance, HPB affirms that even from the standpoint of the Logos, Mula Prakriti is a kind of veil thrown over Parabrahm, the one reality. In its connection with the Manus, or triune Logos of pre-Manvantaric dawn, Uranus represents the spiritual will and intelligent conscious creation, or Kriya Shakti, unfolding through formless eternal essences or archetypes. And this is illustrated as Uranus's function is as the heavenly father of Greek mythology, where he is said to exist outside of time, though incessantly created. With Gaia, he was the patriarch of the first generations of divine beings, and this included the 12 Titans, 3 hundred-handed giants, and 3 one-eyed cyclops, totaling 18 primary children, plus additional offspring that were created from his blood. But he insisted on keeping them all hidden within Gaia, it is said. That is, unmanifest to profane or mortal perception. And this also, among other things, reminds us of what the brotherhood of bodhisattvas do. Out of great wisdom and compassion, they conceal or veil occult truths until humanity is ready to make proper altruistic use of them. Otherwise, further and far greater harm would be perpetuated. Moving into the Hindu tradition, H.P. Blavatsky calls the Rig Veda the oldest of all the known ancient records, which, when properly understood, corroborates the occult teachings in almost every respect. Written down by the earliest initiates of the third race, she says, the Vedic hymns allegorically describe Varuna as the supreme sky god, the universal monarch and king of both gods and men. He was the sovereign deity and guardian of Rita, all cosmic rhythm, motion, and order, the spiritual, moral, and physical laws which govern universal unfoldment. Varuna, she wrote, represents the pinnacle, chief, or synthesis of the dhyanis, the devas, who watch over, harmonically embody, and regulate all natural phenomena, who, quote, make a path for the sun for him to follow. In Vedic hymns, Varuna controls both the 7 rivers of the sky and the 7 rivers of the earth. Esoterically, wrote HPP, the rivers of the sky refer to the 7 descending creative gods or hierarchies, and the rivers of the earth pertain to the 7 root races. Varuna's laws are called Vratani, which is the plural form of Vrata, meaning sacred vows, rules of moral conduct, or divine law, as well as the courses of natural law. And their violation in the Vedic hymns is punished by Indra, the Vedic power of karma, one might say, whose Vrata is greater than the Vratani of any god. In relation to the involutionary cycle of our current round, Varuna is linked to the conditions of the second root race, which is described in the SD as, quote, intellectually inactive, but still psychospiritual mentally, and constantly plunged in abstract contemplation as required by the conditions of the yoga state, unquote. Gigantic, androgynous, and etheric in bodily form, the second race did not die, we're told, but reproduced progeny through a form, what we would call budding, into which they then passed from one generation to the next. Through the first and second races, the monad is described as pure Atma Buddhi, while only in the third is Manas awakened. According to the esoteric commentaries, however, this did not prevent the sons of Mahat, the lords of persevering, ceaseless devotion, from breathing their essence into some portion of the second root race and taking their abode therein. In the early part of the third race, we're told, it was these sons of Mahat who produced by Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Ichcha Shakti, divine will, divine imagination, and divine knowledge, the sons of will and yoga, quote unquote. This is perhaps why the Vahan, or vehicle of Varuna in the Vedic tradition, was Makara, as depicted here in this temple sculpture. The Makara was the sea dragon, fire-breathing, symbolizing the Kumaras, the mind-born sons of Brahma. And then we are given this magnificent quote, Volume 1, page 207. It was not a race, this progeny produced by the sons of Mahat. It was at first a wondrous being called the Initiator, and after him a group of semi-divine and semi-human beings set apart in archaic Genesis for certain purposes. There are those in whom are said to have incarnated the highest dhyanis, munis and rishis from previous manvantras, to form the nursery for future human adepts on this earth and during the present cycle. He is, as said, the nameless one who has so many names, and yet whose names and whose very nature are unknown. He is the initiator, called the Great Sacrifice. And it is from within this nursery that arose those same beings who later in the third race awakened the spark of Manas within humanity as a whole, and who taught the earliest civilizations all the divine arts and sciences. This, of course, included astronomy and astrology, and exact mathematical and geometric knowledge of the positioning of the planets and stars, along with penetrating insight into their inner meaning and intimate relationship to the karma of the earth and its string of globes. Just last week, the San Diego ULT had 2 talks on the many golden age mysteries of Jupiter. We learned that, according to the SD, both Jupiter and Saturn Kronos are related to the third race. And in part, this means that, yes, it was a time when the gods walked the earth, where humanity as a whole first experienced the lighting up of self-conscious intelligence and choice. As a result, we experienced our unity with God, with all other beings and forces of nature. But the third race is also that pivotal epoch in which we separated into male and female and first began to experience death. In Greek mythology, this was allegorized by Kronos as the symbolic son who mutilates and cuts himself off from his father, thus falling from the unconditioned into the finite and time-bound. And this transition that occurred in the third root race from the astral to the physical form and the development of sensation and reason on the physical plane also meant the obscuration of that inner eye of intuition and soul wisdom. In the next generation of the Greek pantheon, that is, in the fourth root race, the son of Kronos, the insatiable Zeus, repeats the act. He mutilates Kronos and chains Prometheus to the cliffs. In this way, the continuity provided by soul memory is lost. The misuse of the desire principle in the fourth root race resulted in a further unnecessary and tragic fall, resulting in the closing of the third eye. And in Hesiod, part of Zeus's vengeance for the fire of the gods having been brought to humanity by Prometheus is presenting Epimetheus with Pandora. Her idle curiosity and carelessness, as the story goes, releases sickness, death, and many other unspecified evils into the world. However, what is preserved in the magical jar that she opens is the indestructible spirit of hope. Reincarnation is spoken of as the doctrine of hope because it affirms the tremendous creative and unconquerable capacities of the human mind when conjoined with the diamond heart. And Shelley captured this most beautifully in his ode to Prometheus Unbound. To forgive wrongs darker than death or night, to defy power which seems omnipotent, to love and bear, to hope till hope creates from its own wreck the thing it contemplates, neither to change, nor falter, nor repent. This, like thy glory, Titan, is to be good, great, and joyous, beautiful and free. This is alone life, joy, empire, and victory. On the upward arc of evolution through the latter portion of the fifth root race, Prometheus is unbound. Humanity now approaches a condition which will permit us to unleash the vast potentiality which existed but was lost on the opposite descending arc of the cycle. Through altruism and alchemical self-regeneration, the self-conscious correction and moral realignment of the inverted mind and heart, the wisdom of Uranian timelessness, universal brotherhood, and noetic creativity will begin to reawaken, we're told, within the incarnating temporal personality. Buddhic intuition can and will merge with higher monastic intellection, inching our way through many trials, suffering, collective initiations, and transformations, including the great deluge to arrive at the close of the fifth race. Humanity will emerge like a phoenix from the ashes. In the sixth root race, we are told, we will have fully regained the faculties of purified imagination, what Judge calls the king faculty. And this will include the divine capacity for procreation solely through the power of thought and purity of compassionate intention, giving birth to Buddha-like and Christ-like races of children. Astrological dimensions of Uranus. Although the planet Uranus is visible to the naked eye in the night sky, it is not easily distinguished from the surrounding star clusters without a telescope. While not discovered or recognized as a planet of our solar system until 1781, H.P. Blavatsky taught that, in fact, many more planets than those known to modern astronomy were and are known to the adepts and bodhisattvas of the sacred science. Without doubt, this is direct knowledge gained through the awakening of inner visionary capacities, as mentioned in Book 3 of Patanjali's Yoga Aphorisms, rather than the use of any external technologies. Verse 29 states that, quote, by concentrating his mind upon the polar star, the ascetic is able to know the fixed time and motion of every star in the Brahmanda of which the earth is a part. Brahmanda here can mean our solar system, our galaxy, or the cosmos as a whole. And Nilakantha Chathurdara, a prominent Indian scholar who lived in Varanasi in the latter half of the 17th century, asserted that not only Uranus, but both Neptune, only verified by telescope in the mid-1800s, and Pluto, discovered in 1930, were all known in the astronomical sciences of ancient India. Uranus was mentioned in the Mahabharata, he wrote in his commentaries, as both Shveta and Mahapata. Mahapata means one who has a greater orbit, referring to the astronomical fact that the orbit of Uranus far exceeds even that of Saturn. While Saturn has an average orbital distance from the Sun of 9 astronomical units, Uranus is more than double that, at roughly 19.5 AUs. This also means sunlight takes 2 hours and 40 minutes to reach it, making it on average roughly 400 times dimmer than it is on our planet. I believe it's around 8 minutes of travel from the sun to Earth. In modern Vedic astrology, Uranus is referred to as Arun, Prajapati, or Harshal. And all of these terms link significantly into the esoteric symbolism of the planet, as we have already mentioned. Arun, for example, is the charioteer of Surya, directing his path via 7 horses through the 7 heavens. And the Lord Prajapati in the later Vedas mostly coincides or overlaps with the characteristics of the earlier Varuna. He is commonly connected with the creative origin of the 7 or 10 mind-born sons of Brahma. Uranus, perhaps more than any other planet in our system, is governed by cycles of 7. Not only is it the 7th planet from the sun, but as measured by earthly time, it rotates on its own axis every 17 hours, which is 10 plus 7, and 14 minutes, 2 times 7. It also maintains an 84-year orbital period around the sun, which of course is 12 times 7. And because its axis of rotation is tilted 97.777 degrees in relation to its orbit, its poles received 42 Earth years, that is 6 times 7, of sunlight, followed by 42 years of continuous darkness. This long winter season is where we find the lowest recorded temperatures in our known solar system, minus 371.56 degrees Fahrenheit, even colder than Pluto. Astrologically, there are several meaningful synchronicities of our reflecting upon Uranus, as I mentioned at the beginning. Astrologer Evan Nathaniel Grimm, for example, points out that Uranus recently squared Mars, the planet of war and procreation, in June of 2025 during the 12-day war between Iran and Israel. A second planetary opposition of Uranus and Mars began on Friday, February 27th, 2026, and remained in effect until March 2nd. And it was during this time, on the 28th, in fact, that the US and Israel initiated large-scale coordinated air and naval strikes on Iran. The associations of Uranus with the mysteries, with the powers of will and imagination, and the effects of its misuse through sectarian claims or tribalistic religion are evident. Destroying others is a form of self-destruction. The karma of the 4th root race and the inversions of the Piscean age may be surfacing in the form of violent grabs for wealth, power, and dominance, utilizing misguided religious extremism and partisan media manipulation to hypnotize and sway the tides of public opinion. Currently, Uranus sits in the constellation of Taurus, where it is debilitated. Its energies dampened and mostly latent, while still fomenting revolutions in finance, we're told, agriculture, and robotics via AI. This is what has occurred especially over the last 7 years. But in April of 2026, it transits into Gemini. This is next month, where it was in the birth chart of the United States. And as mentioned, this is an 84-year cycle marked in its last 3 transits by revolutionary wars involving vast shifts in political and social institutions. For example, in 1774, as Uranus entered Gemini for a 7-year period, the First Continental Congress convened. 1 year later, the war with Britain began, followed by the ratification of the Declaration of Independence in 1776. And in 1777, the Articles of Confederation were adopted as America's first constitution. The passage of Uranus through Gemini ended at that time in 1781, marked by a pivotal victory for the American colonies, concluding the Revolutionary War. In 1858, the next transit of Uranus in Gemini is the year the Civil War began, resulting in the abolition of slavery for 4 million people and the reuniting of the Republic. The most recent transit through Gemini was 1942, a critical turning point of World War II, which overthrew a world-dominating and brutal military dictator, fundamentally reshaping the global balance of power, and which eventually led to the founding of the United Nations in that same period in 1945. Technological breakthroughs at this time, such as the splitting of the atom, penicillin, and advanced computing capabilities, continue to have their global impacts today. Uranus is without doubt the planet of rebellion, sudden, unexpected breakthroughs, and pivotal cultural transformations. In Gemini, it is linked, as we have seen, with the overthrowing of the status quo, the toppling of kings and dictators, or deeply entrenched injustices. Gemini represents the realignment of the inverted mind, called the crucible of the Aquarian Age. For the second time in the Aquarian Age, Uranus transited through Aquarius from 1995 through 2003, ushering in Generation Z, who are now in their early to late 20s. When positively aspected, the transit is said to bring progressive forms of vision, intuition, and humanitarian forms of innovation. Raised in the age of the internet and global connectivity, fearless and nonviolent activists and ambassadors such as Malala Yousafzai and Greta Thunberg have emerged. Considering that Pluto, the planet of transformation, entered Aquarius in 2024, where it will remain for 20 years, the destabilizing, destructive black swan period we are currently in. This is how it is labeled by some Vedic astrologers as the black swan. This period could be followed by a longer-term moral reckoning and realignment as Generation Z moves into a mature adulthood. More inclusive and just forms of governmental and social reform could emerge, but of course, not without conflict and struggle. Those who wish to transform must be true to vows and pledges, as reliable as the Vratani of Varuna, the music of the spheres, ready to fearlessly stand up for principles of justice and universal ideals. Whether nations are ready to accomplish this transition nonviolently, standing in wise compassion and civility, joining arm in arm with humanity as a whole, remains to be seen. Thank you so much for your patience in allowing me to draw out a few of these ideas connected with Uranus.
I have one quick question. I changed it because Kirk already answered it about light, but and Gustav Holst says the planets. Uranus is regarded as the magician, a rather mysterious figure in the universe. And I wonder if you could address that.
The magician?
Yeah, the magician.
I don't think I've run across that, but I would say
that great
but,
piece of music, the Planets by Gustav Holst, the great
okay.
composer. And
Okay.
Jupiter is the bringer of jollity. the expansion, but Uranus is the magician. He's kind of like a hierophant.
Yeah. Well, I would say that that bears out by the comments, that we tried to point to. And, this was as much a learning experience for me as for anyone, but that this connection, which gets repeated in different ways, of the of Jupiter being linked to that aspect of the logos, which is even beyond the seven dhyanis, right? So this idea that, as HPB points out, of Runa as the source and origin of the seven rivers of the sky, the seven rivers of the earth, referring to the descending hierarchies of the gods and the seven root races. So it's that from which all of that emerges. And in that sense, we get these very beautiful, stunning passages in the SD, both in book 1 and book 2, where she says that what we call the human spirit, the capacity of the human spirit, which she says is this idea of the Manu, who is the totality of humanity, but also that being which initiates at the root of the cycle, and is the culmination, the distillation of the wisdom gained through that cycle. So we have both the root and the seed Manu, but it's representative of those beings who were perfected in former periods and who are watching over and incarnating at critical times to teach and aid and instruct. So that's why you get this connection with, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And that passage, if you go back and read that passage about the initiator, she says that all the great teachers that emerged over the course of the entire cycle of root races in our round, they have all emerged from that nursery, which those beings established in that transition from the second to the third root race. That's the source of, beings such as Jesus, as Buddha, Shankaracharya, Krishna, on and on. All the great sages have emerged from that one source, that one root source. So yes, very much so. In that sense, very much so connected with the magician. So thanks for your question, Judy.
David, I thought you had your hand up for a minute. If you're still here. Oh,
is my hand up? Okay. Then I was thinking of one thing, Kurt, that was interesting. You might have mentioned this, I might have missed it, but I've heard that Uranus, like in astrology, is often thought of as the higher octave of Mercury. So that Mercury's kind of the quick lower mind, the rational mind, while Uranus represents more the higher mind and enlightening change, like you had described earlier, rather than just the quickness of Mercury. It's like, explosive change.
Yeah, I think that's for those of us who dwell in the lower realms of Mercury, you could say the lower mind, that when wisdom strikes, when true wisdom strikes, it's like it's thunderous. It silences, what we thought was true. We suddenly realize, whoops, I was completely off track, and an adjustment is needed, right? And you could say that's also the way that the intuition functions. The stories about Einstein where, he saw what was true, but he couldn't express it mathematically. It wasn't as though he saw the mathematics of it. He saw the truth of it. And then he had to build the mathematics to show that it was true, right? And it's so you could say it seems like that's part of the way humanity works. You have an incarnation of a great being, And of course, we're not going to be able to assimilate what that being has to say in one generation. We're not even going to recognize it, possibly. And so, but over time, there's that some assimilations can take place. Um, and so, but I think that's also this connected with this idea of the purity of the unmanifest, you know. It's like what is said of the Buddha as being a fifth rounder. Or wait, no, Plato was a fifth rounder and the Buddha was a sixth rounder, right? Is that they're coming from this higher unmanifest, what is unmanifest to us, and kind of dipping down and giving some expression, you know, some fragmentary but still helpful expression of these deeper truths, you know, so that we can, you know, begin working our way back to them. So yeah, maybe that's just a few comments there.
I got a question for you, Kurt. What do you think about this whole thing about the seven sacred planets? And then it turns out that the moon and the sun is part of them. That's been bothering me for a long time. It's like, those guys are not planets. You're not fooling me. But all of a sudden there's Uranus in there. And
Yeah.
you kind of were pretty specific about Uranus in relation to like Sunday and everything that HPB is saying. What do you think about the moon? And because it almost feels like those the sun and the moon are almost like placeholders. It's like when you kids are ready to start thinking about the real deal, we'll let you know. But meanwhile, we're going to give you these here placeholders. Anyway, what do you think about all that?
Well, obviously, it was something the veiling, you know, that's the other aspect of veiling, right? That sometimes truths are deliberately veiled, right?
Right.
Because humanity is not ready for the real thing.
Yeah.
And for various reasons, morally and otherwise. Mentally, it might just throw us out of whack.
Yeah.
So yeah, that again, that also is connected with Uranus, and that actually, you know, it also links up to the idea of the magician, is that that's part of the function of these great beings, is to, yes, to give out teaching, but also to veil, that, to protect
Yes.
and conceal and prevent humanity from making advances that would otherwise be destructive for it and just lead to more suffering, right? So that's a critical role that the magician plays in what's the word, blinds, creating
Yes.
blinds, right? So yeah, they're not always such a bad thing. So I think it's part of that. In you know, this, the way that HPB presents it is like tongue in cheek. She doesn't come out and say Uranus is the sun. She quotes somebody else who said
Yep.
that, and then
Yep.
she says, "Oh, it can't be." Right? But so you know, this whole thing about the awakening of intuition being necessary for the comprehension of esoteric teaching and the traversing of the path. I didn't really get into that. I just mentioned it briefly at the beginning that really none of this becomes. We're not going to really know the truths about the planets until we have realigned ourselves morally and mentally and altruistically, right, for the benefit of the whole. And it's not until we are, you know, solidly in that path of bodhicitta, and you know, become true shotapatis, stream entrants, that some of these deeper truths can be revealed. But it seems that they're gonna come at an interior level, right? That whatever diagrams, whatever literature is being given, it's it's meant to, you know, this, the way that HPB presents it is like tongue in cheek. She doesn't come out and say Uranus is the sun. She quotes somebody else who said that, and then she says, "Oh, it can't be." It's meant to be steps towards awakening an intuitive, a direct apprehension of the deeper truth.
Laura's got her hand up now.
Yes.
Well, it's
Laura.
hard to come up with a question at the moment and still processing the wonderful talk that you gave, Kirk. Thank you. It certainly opens up a few more doors of contemplation. But I wondered, you mentioned a talk given at the Institute of World Culture, and
Yes.
I looked for a recent one, but I didn't see one. Who was
Well,
it?
it just happened today, just a few hours ago.
Oh,
So
okay.
it probably isn't posted yet, actually. So
Okay.
usually it's about 24 hours.
Okay, so who was the speaker?
It was a fellow named Ryan Quirk.
He's spoken for the Aquarian series before. He spoke on noetic
Yeah.
psychology last year and something
Okay.
else the year before. So he's
Okay.
quite brilliant young fellow.
Yeah.
Ryan
Okay.
Quirk.
Yeah. And he did it's a kind of explanation, examination of the autobiography of a yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda's book.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, be sure you stay for the question and answer period because that's where all the jewels came out. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Right.
it should be up in a day or two.
Could I ask you one more question about Uranus? Is it true that the North Pole is pointed towards the sun? Or is it, no, actually, it is half of the year, right? Or
Half the
actually,
year.
a quarter of the year, because then it's going around sideways and then it's not really.
Yes, and right now, but we just passed if I'm not mistaken, no, actually, I think it's 20. We're heading towards what would be considered the winter solstice of Uranus because the southern pole is almost in that direct alignment.
So it's pointing towards the sun more or less. But right
Yeah,
now,
right now it's
it is.
yeah. Mhm. In 2028, it will be the northern pole will be facing directly to the sun.
Well, Kirk, that was beyond magnificent. And you really you took us there, as they say.